Hi everyone, welcome to Gallery Teachers Workshop. My name is Mari Pettigrew, and today's topic is clarifying meaning and checking understanding. As I said in the introduction, the topic of this workshop is contextualizing language and clarifying meaning. If we take a very simplistic historical view of learning languages, we can go back to Skinner with his behavioral approach. The idea that repetition of language would inculcate good habits. And so repetition was a good way of learning languages. We moved on from there. People like John Dewey in the 1940s talked about experiential learning, learning by doing. And then we moved on to people like Paul Asher with a total physical response, which goes back to the idea of learning by doing, because the students would listen to instructions from the teacher and copy what the teacher was doing in order to learn language. Following on from the total physical response, we had people like Jane Willis, who talked about task-based learning. So learning by doing particular tasks, which again is experiential learning. And from there, we moved on to people like Stephen Krashen, who talked about comprehensible input, that you need to make your presentation of the language clear and convey meaning in order for students to be able to learn the language. And moving on from there, we now have the idea that you don't even need course books. Brooke Bedding and Scott Thornbury talk about dogme. Dogme is this theory where we don't have course books. The students just discuss topics and the teacher helps with any language that they need for the topic, which feeds very nicely into more current thoughts on emergent language, the idea that we don't teach language so much as help students to fill in the bits and pieces of language that they need. It's called emergent language. And so we're teaching students what they need at the point of need. So these are the theories behind teaching language. And they all sort of fit the various techniques that we're going to look at in a moment. So the traditional approach one, we teach language as part of our lesson aims. We have course books. The course books decide what language will be taught, and the teacher apportions small chunks of language, lesson from lesson, building up a repertoire of grammar points, vocabulary, and so on. So you can plan your lesson in advance, and that helps you to plan with the meaning of the language, the form of the language, and the pronunciation of the language. There were novice teachers. I think this is very important because they can't be expected to know everything about the language when they start out, and it allows them to build up their knowledge as they go along. Approach 2, which is based on the idea of dogme or dealing with emergent language, is unplanned. So it arises from course discussions. That way it makes the lesson much more student-led as you're dealing with a language at the point of need. So is it planned or is it spontaneous? The two possibilities. So we think about the different ways we can clarify meaning. You can contextualize language and clarify meaning. And I think one of the most important things, if we go back to people like Stephen Krashen, is to make the language comprehensible input. Yeah? So you need a context, some sort of context, which is clear to the learner and will help with clarifying the meaning of the language. You could start by using flashcards, for example, at a very basic level. So with elementary students, flashcards are good for introducing new language. Yeah? So if we have, for example, a flashcard of this item, you can ask the students what it is. Now, they may not know the name, in which case you're going to have to teach it. Or someone may know the name, so they can share it with the others. Obviously, you can't elicit what students don't know. But out of the group, there's probably one student who knows that this is an eggplant. Or they may have another name for it. They may call it an aubergine. But for this lesson, we're going to deal with eggplants. So you've got the picture, you elicit or supply the word, and then you model and drill. It's an eggplant, yeah? Then once you've modeled and drilled, you can show the word. And you can say to the students, stress on this word. And they'll tell you it's the first syllable. And they'll also tell you it's a noun. Can you count eggplants? One eggplant, two eggplants. Yeah, so it's a countable noun. You could even show the linking. It's an eggplant, or the pronunciation. So here we're eliciting the word, we're clarifying the meaning, we're checking understanding, modeling and drilling, and then we can show the form of the word, deal with the pronunciation. But by providing the flashcard, you've dealt with the meaning, you elicit it from the students if they know it, you supply it if they don't know it, and then you can model drill so they know how to say it. And then once you've done that, then you can show the word. Other ways of contextualizing language. You can give a context and check questions. So for example, my friend's son fell into a pond yesterday and came home completely wet. Yeah. So do you know an expression for completely wet? When you're so wet, the water goes through to your skin. Could elicit from the students. Yeah. Perhaps they'll say soak to the skin. Yeah. Which is a good one. Yeah. But what you want to teach them is drenched. Yeah. Drenched. So you can say he was drenched to the skin. So if you're drenched to the skin, are you very wet? Yeah. Are you wet through your clothes to your skin? Yeah. So listen, he was drenched to the skin. He was drenched to the skin. Then the students can repeat it, and then you can show it. And then you can say to them, so what kind of word is drenched? Yeah. They'll tell you it's an adjective. Okay. And he was drenched to the skin. So where is a stress in the sentence? You get drenched in skin. Look what happens to the other words that are not so important in the sentence. Yeah. Was, took, and the. So we're using the schwa here because they're not so important. They're weak forms. Yeah. He was drenched to the skin. Can you hear the ed ending, drenched to the skin? I don't think so. Yeah. So drenched, we're actually taking out the T at the end, the ed ending, the t, yeah, because we've got at the beginning of the next word. So drenched, drenched. So other ways that we can deal with meaning. We could use board drawings and timelines. So for example, You want to teach, he remembered to post the letter. So first we do our line, and then we intersect the line. And then we say where the past is, where now is, and where the future is. And then we can say to the students, so when you want to put remembered on this line, remembered, what tense is that? So it's a past simple. So they'll say, well, we'll put it in the past. So you, okay. Now, what to post? Does it go before he remembered or after he remembered? There'll be lots of discussion about this. You establish this after remembered. Okay, so he remembered to post a letter. So then we can use board drawings. We can introduce our man. Here he is here with a letter. Do you think he said when he remembered? We elicit that from the students, and you get something like, I have to post his letter. Okay. And then we can say to them, well, how do we show him posting the letter? You elicit a few examples, and then maybe we'll come up with the postbox and putting the letter in the postbox. So we've established the meaning of the language, but we just need to check that the students are happy with that. So we can ask our concept checking questions. So did these actions happen in the past? Hopefully you get the answer yes. Did both of them happen in the past? Yes. And did he post the letter first? Yes. So then we've got your concept checking questions. Other ways of checking, clarifying meaning, checking understanding is realia, real objects. There's a picture of the real object, and here is the real object. Yeah. So then we can elicit, what's that? Yeah. And we establish it's an egg timer or a timer. The nice thing about realia is you can touch it. Yeah. You can see it, you can play with it, pass it around. Yeah. And so it makes a physical connection with the word egg timer. You might want to teach herbs. Yeah. So parsley, for example, it's a herb. It's green. It's got leaves. What's basil? It's a herb. It's green. It's got leaves. Yeah. What's rosemary? It's a herb. It's green, and so on. Yeah. So obviously, without the actual herbs, it's very difficult to clarify what they are. I've got some pictures here, which are quite nice, but the students may not know what they smell like. Yeah. So you could have the actual herb, like this is parsley, so they can break a bit off. They can smell it, they can taste it, and they have a better understanding of what it is, but they're also experiencing the feel, the visual impact of it, the smell, the taste. That's going to make it a lot more memorable than, it's green, it smells nice, we use it in cooking. Yeah. And the same with spices. Yeah. Got lots of lovely, lovely spices, but without actually seeing the real spice or smelling it or touching it, you're really not going to have much of an idea of what it is. Another way of clarifying meaning is a cline. So a cline is like a line on a continuum. So for example, you can have 100 degrees Celsius down to 0 degrees Celsius. And between that, you've got all the different degrees. Yeah? So we want to look at adjectives to describe degrees of heat. So we can start with 100 degrees Celsius, which is boiling. And what we got for 0 degrees Celsius, got from the students, we can get freezing. Okay, so under boiling, what are we going to have? They might come with hot, and the opposite of hot, cold. And then going down again, if it's not hot, it's warm. And what's the opposite of warm? Cool. I mean, the students themselves can move these words around. If you've got a smartboard, they can come up and move them around on the smartboard. If you have more basic equipment, you can have just cards with the words on, and they can put the cards in the correct order. Lines also work really well for functional language. So let's say we were dealing with apologies, yeah? Then you can give them all the functional exponents that you want to deal with, and you can ask them to put them in the correct order from most formal to least formal. And the students can move bits of paper around on their desk, or they can come up to the smartboard and move things around, but they order the functions into the degrees of formality, informality. For example, apologizing. Please accept my sincere apologies for whatever. Yeah. I really must apologize for forgetting your birthday. I'm terribly sorry for forgetting your birthday. Sorry for forgetting your birthday. Soz. Very informal slang. And a recent one I've heard is, my bad. So different ways of apologizing. And it's a good idea to have the form that comes after in a different color to help them for when they want to form their own sentences. Total physical response. So this sort of harks back to John Dewey's experiential learning, the idea of being physically involved in the actions, doing, learning by doing. It was an idea put forward by James Asher in 1965. And the idea is that it mimics the way that children learn their first language and creates a brain link between the action and speech. And it's fun and it's memorable. And making your language learning memorable is really, really important. There's a little video here with Herbert showing how he did this work with a little sort of like total physical response class with a group of younger learners.
Drive your car, vroom. Hug your teddy.
Okay, so that's just a little idea of what he does with his total physical response. So what are the issues with learning languages? Concept checking questions, yeah. So concept checking questions are designed to help students understand a language item. So once you've presented the language item and you've clarified the meaning, you then ask your concept check questions to find out if they've understood the meaning that you want to give them. So what you often hear teachers saying is, do you understand? Or is that clear? We all know that, right? Or, okay. But these should be absolute taboos. They do not check understanding. Your students will just nod their heads because they don't want to embarrass you by saying, well, actually, I don't understand what you're talking about. Yeah. So it's very important that you ask questions which focus on the meaning of the language that you're teaching in context. And the context is very important as well. There needs to be a context. You can't clarify meaning without a context. And the context can be all sorts of things. We've seen already, it can be realia, It can be flashcards. It can be a little story. It can be a Klein. It can be building up a situation with timelines. Yeah. But there has to be a context. The reason is that some words have completely different meaning in a different context. For example, the word sow. Yeah. To sow, S-O-W, you can see above the picture of somebody sowing seeds. Yeah. Sow could also be S-E-W, to sew, to join two pieces of material together. But S-O-W also has a different pronunciation. It can be sow. Yeah. Sow is a female pig, as you can see at the top of the picture there. So the context is absolutely crucial for clarifying the meaning of a language, because it's the meaning in that context. Some concept checking questions are just plain silly. Yeah. So you're trying to clarify the meaning of mirror, and you say, do you put it on the floor? Well, it doesn't really help very much. And some are patronizing. Is ice cream hot? If you've got a picture of ice cream, or you've even got ice cream, and to ask the question, is ice cream hot, is patronizing, because it clearly isn't. The other thing is the majority of CCQs have yes/no answers, and there's a 50% chance of the students being right or wrong, and that may not clarify meaning altogether. So sometimes you need to think of other ways. Maybe having an information question as well for a CCQ. Some CCQs you don't even have to ask. They're not relevant. If you've taught, vegetables or fruit or whatever using flashcards, then you just need to hold up the flashcard and say, what's this? And the students will be able to tell you. So timelines are great, for clarifying meaning of some grammatical forms. Jane began teaching in March 2018. She's been teaching for 6 years. So we can show where she began teaching. She's still teaching now. And the wiggly line to show the sort of like continued action up to now, and a dotted line afterwards. Yeah. Great. Yeah. But it is culturally dependent. So depending on who your students are, they may not have the same idea of past, present, and future as everyone. So timelines might not be relevant to them. There's a little website here that you can have a look at about how that can be problematic. And board drawings are great. And they're really easy, and they can be done on the spot. So, if you're dealing with a bit of emergent language, it's quite easy for you to scribble something on the board to show what you're talking about. A giraffe, what's a giraffe? You draw it on the board. The students can have a bit of a laugh that your drawing is a bit rubbish. But that's okay, because it means that they can practice lots of different language by trying to guess what it is you've actually drawn on the board. If you're trying to clarify the difference between a sprout, a cabbage, and a lettuce, it's a little bit difficult, as you can see from my drawings here, because they all look pretty much the same. The sprout's a bit smaller, but, it could just be a small drawing of a cabbage. So having the real thing, realia, would be a lot easier for clarifying the difference, or certainly very good flashcards that might clarify the difference. The other limitation about drawing on the board is that if you're a fantastic artist, then the students might be more impressed with what you were doing and less focused on the language, which can happen as well. I can't say that that's ever been a problem for me. Other things that might be difficult to teach are shrimp prawn or langoustine, crayfish, lobster, all very different. You'd certainly need some proper pictures of them and some good CCQs to check what they are. I think it'd be difficult to bring the real thing into the classroom. So realia might be out of the question. But board drawings are great, just for a quick clarification. So total physical response, as we said before, was introduced by James Asher. I think it works very, very well for younger learners, copying teachers' physical actions in response to verbal input. Yeah. Stand up, sit down, touch your nose, wave your hand. And it can be said to be similar to the way that children learn language anyway. I think it's limited to maybe concrete examples of language, might be more difficult for abstract concepts. And I think it might be a bit too childish for adult learners who might feel sort of reduced to a childlike state. However, it's fantastic for younger learners. So I've given you the link so you can watch the full video of Herbert Gupta doing his total physical response lesson. So realia, so the real objects we talked about before, the timer, the herbs, or whatever, are very useful in the classroom. You can touch them, you can smell them, you can operate them, you can do whatever, and it makes things much more memorable. It's a full sensory experience. However, it does involve a lot of preparation on the teacher's part. If you're lucky, you've got a big classroom and you can store things to use whenever, that's great. But if not, and you're having to bring them into school, it can be a bit of a pain. And if you're having to get, fruit and vegetables and so on to bring in for lessons on fruit and vegetables or cooking, then, you've got heavy bags to carry into school. However, if you want to teach herbs or spices or things like that, there's no way that you can do it without using realia. And you can have lots of props so that, if you're doing a role play in a restaurant, you can have menus, you can have, tea towels for the waiter, you can have aprons for the waiter, you can have, the bottle of wine, the bottle opener, plates, forks and knives, so that it makes the role play much more fun. Yeah. Or you can have hats and moustaches and glasses and walking sticks and all sorts of things for the role plays. And if teaching quantities, packet of biscuits, a jar of jam, a bottle of Coke, a can of beans, it's good to have all these different things there, the realia, to be able to teach it clearly to the students. Lines, I said, you could use for degrees of formality, informality. You could also use them to explore modality. How certain is the person? From 100% sure to 100% sure not. Yeah. So from I'm absolutely certain it's him, or even before that, it is him, be even more sure, down to I'm absolutely certain it's not him. Again, the students can order these functional exponents into the degrees of certainty and uncertainty. For checking understanding, there's one thing sort of clarifying the meaning by, showing the object, by timelines, by clines, by context, and so on. But CCQs are quite important, and they're the things that people really struggle with. And so you need to think about reducing the meaning to its essential elements of meaning. The meaning of any language has to be reduced to its essential elements of meaning. So you establish a context, you find out what the essential elements of meaning are, and then you turn the essential elements of meaning into concept checking questions. But here's a tip, yeah? Don't use a target language in the concept checking questions. Why? Because technically the students aren't supposed to know the language. However, you can use them as a final check with vocabulary. So let's have a look at these two people. I'm sure you recognize Tom Hanks. And the young chap next to him is his son. Yeah. So what do we know about them? Yeah. Well, we know that it's Tom Hanks and his son Colin. We know Tom Hanks is an actor. And in fact, his son Tom is also an actor. And Colin looks like Tom. So we can say Tom takes after his father. Is it only looking like someone? Yeah. Let's have a look. They're both actors. Colin looks like Tom. Tom and Colin are blood relatives, and that's an important part of this takes after. And Tom is older than Colin, and that's also an important part of the meaning of takes after. So normally you have around 3 elements of meaning. 4 is quite a few for this one. But then we change those into questions. So Tom and Colin are both actors. So we can see the essential elements of meaning here, and then we can change them into concept checking questions. Do Tom and Colin do the same job? Well, they're both actors, so yes. Does Colin look like Tom? So Colin looks like Tom, so the answer is yes. Is Tom older than Colin? Well, Tom is older than Colin, so yes. Can you take after someone who's you're not related to by blood? No. And can you take after someone who's younger than you? No. Okay, so Tom is older than Colin. So you can check understanding of the language there. And then you might do some pronunciation. So where is the pronunciation? And Tom takes after his father. So you could say after and father are the stressed words. We could have some linking, takes after. And if we allied the H, after is. So Tom takes after his father. Tom takes after his father. And then you could have intonation going down. You know, Tom takes after his father. Other ways to check understanding. Let's say we're teaching the word helmet. Yeah. We can give the students 4 different helmets. A, B, C, D. And they have to circle the letter of the image that's not a helmet. Okay. So what do we know about helmets? You wear them on your head, and they protect your head from injury. So we've got the worker's helmet, we've got a motorcycle helmet, and we've got a riding helmet. So students are going to circle C, the one that's not a helmet, which is a nice visual way of checking understanding. We could also extend sentences to check understanding. Yeah. So he used to ride a motorbike. So the teacher says he used to ride a motorbike, and the students need to finish it. So now he doesn't. Teacher, because he's married with children. It's too dangerous. So they're showing understanding that way. Or the teacher says, the bank manager refused to give me an overdraft because, and the students have to complete, I didn't have a job, or I'd exceeded my overdraft limit. You'd better take an umbrella in case. So teacher says, what will happen in the future? Students, it will rain. Says the teacher. What tense do we use after in case? So the student corrects it. Yeah, it rains. Yeah. And the teacher would say, we're talking about the present or the future? We're talking about the future. Just check they've understood. So we can use mime to clarify meaning, so like total physical response. We could have non-verbal responses, so ask the learners to shake their hands or ask them to shake someone else's hand. And we can use antonyms, words with opposite meaning, or synonyms, words with similar meanings. So he's sad. What's the opposite of sad? Happy. He's sad. What's another word for sad? Unhappy. Yeah. Or unhappy. Often when we've done some receptive skills or reading or listening, we might want to do a little work on vocabulary from the reading text, which is another context for clarifying meaning. In this case, there was a listening text from Total English Upper Intermediate, and the students did all the listening skills on it. And it was time to do a little bit of work on phrasal verbs in the text. So you can see the phrasal verbs in the text are underlined. And on the left, you have the definitions, the meanings of the phrasal verbs. So you can use this text as a context for clarifying the meaning of the language. So first of all, they have to look at the text and see, takes after. So what's the meaning of takes after? And they've heard the text. So would you think Tom takes after? Do you think Tom takes after his dad? Well, I suppose so in some ways. Oh, well, I mean, they're both very stubborn. Yeah. So this is the context for takes after. So then they look down this list of meanings and they find to behave in a similar way to an older close blood relative or look like them. Yeah. So then they can match J to takes after. And obviously the teacher needs to think afterwards about the concept checking questions when they're feeding back. You know, so is his father older than him? Yeah. Are they blood relatives? In what ways is he similar to his father? They're both stubborn. Okay. So does Tim have a similar character to his father? Yes, they're both stubborn. In what ways is he similar to him? He's stubborn. Then you can model and drill, he takes after his father. Remembering takes after and after his father. After his father. And then you can highlight the linking and the elision and the linking and the intonation. So error correction. When do you deal with errors? If you're focusing on accuracy, then generally you deal with the error immediately. Yeah. Because it needs to be sorted straight away. And there are different ways of dealing with this. There's the techniques from dealing with emergent language. So you could make an explicit reformulation. No, it's not I agree. It's I agree. Or you could just do a recast. I agree. Or you could do metalinguistic feedback. That's when you use the meta-language to describe grammar in your correction. So you don't need the auxiliary verb am. So I agree. We don't need get rid of it. So I agree. You can elicit to encourage the learners to self-correct. So, for example, the student says he has a long hair. Yeah. You can draw a little picture of a man with one hair and say, oh, I mean like this. And then hopefully they'll realize that he has long hair. And then you can establish that hair is uncountable and generally, unless you're talking about the one hair that you found in your dinner. Yeah. You can anticipate the types of errors they're going to have. And so you could give them a control practice with those types of errors in, and they have to correct the errors in the examples. Or you could have a delayed error correction. So after they've been talking together, you can do your error correction. So as they're talking, you make notes of good language or things that they need to improve on, or good language, but it could be better. Yeah, you can make notes of that. You put it up on the board, and then you have your feedback. So a student says he was very wet, which is perfectly good, but maybe you want them to think of something more imaginative. So you can give credit where credit's due. Good. So can you think of an expression to describe this? So they will come up with he's soaked to the skin, or he was absolutely drenched. Yeah. Or the student says they went 2 days ago home. So you just say word order, see if they can sort it out. Yeah. I've been there 3 weeks ago. What do we say when we know the time? So get them to change it to I was there 3 weeks ago. Or what time marker do we use if we want to keep I've been there? They could say recently, or often, or whatever. You could have a combination of the both. Yeah. If they're working on a communicative task, maybe a discussion of some sort, you might just from time to time slip in words that would be helpful for them. So dealing with emergent language, so you know that they're struggling to find a word, and so you can give them that word to use in the communication as they're doing the task. So here are some useful links that you can use. Information on the total physical response, the Herbert video. Future Learn is very good for ideas for teaching. Michael Lewis, the lexical approach, has lots of good ideas for teaching vocabulary. Thornby, how to teach vocabulary. Nick Peachy does some very good stuff on conveying meaning. And a Bible for most novice teachers, I think, is Graham Workman's Concept Questions and Timelines. Yeah. It's very, very good. Very, very helpful. But for me, the key thing is to keep it simple.